Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. And I'd like to thank everyone who came out for the tree lighting last night, a good annual town event. I want to thank the Lions Club for providing the lights. I want to thank the band, the marching band for playing, and Ms. Karen Wardwill for conducting, and fire department for, of course, escorting Santa, and all the people who provided the refreshments at TC Passios. So thank you to everyone and for everybody who attended. Even though it was a pretty foggy maritime evening, it was really a good event. I would ask if there's any opening public comment from the board this evening.
Mr. Chairman, two things. Thanks to the town clerk's office for using the town calendar to list the dates to register to vote for the town meeting and the election. I think that's the first time it's actually gone on the town calendar. It's been listed on the town clerk's page, but to actually there, it's another place, so congratulations on that. And the other thing is thanks to Carrie working with various boards. I've brought up the past that regarding the compliance with the town bylaws on the posting of town board minutes and agendas. That several boards and committees have brought those up to date, most specifically the Conservation Commission and the Housing Authority. So thanks to Carrie for communicating with them, and thanks to the boards that have done that.
Any other public comment? Mr. Toll.
Mr. Chairman, you've mentioned the tree lighting and all the people that were responsible for it. I just want to single out the biggest kid in Lunenburg, Dave McDonald, who cheerleaded and twisted arms and got several unaffiliated people as part of that process.
Well, thank you. And I did not mean to exclude him. Of course, he and his merry band decorated town center, and I'm glad for the Ledger's involvement for bringing back the post office box for Santa's mailbox. So again, that is open as well.
Let's just point out, thank Mark Flagg for providing the bucket truck to get the highest of heights on the trees, another improvement this year. So he was out there masterfully managing that. So it was a good effort. So thanks everyone that was involved.
Excellent. Okay, just for those who may not have heard, I'm just going to read two press releases that were released yesterday, and I'm only doing this in case anybody is interested and had not already heard the releases from the police department and the schools, from the school department and school committee on the ongoing activities in town. The press release from the police department was yesterday afternoon. Based upon our investigation to date, we have not found any conclusive evidence linking any present member of the Lunenburg High School football team to the hate crime incident reported on November 15th, 2013. This statement relates only to the graffiti painted on a resident's home and has nothing whatsoever to do with any football game-related issues that have been investigated by the school district. We take matters such as this type of hate crime very seriously. Consequently, this investigation is ongoing, and we are confident that a conclusion will be forthcoming. A little bit after that, the Lunenburg Public Schools released this statement. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, we received a statement from the Lunenburg Police Department stating that based upon their investigation to date, they have not found any conclusive evidence linking any present member of the Lunenburg High School football team to the hate crime incident reported on November 15th, 2013. We hope for a speedy resolution to the police investigation. The educators and coaches of Lunenburg value diversity, tolerance, and acceptance. We are a community of educators who care deeply about all of our students. Our concern for the safety, well-being, and education of our students and players continues to be our top priority. So that is the latest official word on that incident, and I just wanted that to be public for those who had not heard it in any other form. Board vacancies and committee vacancies. Again, I will just continue to announce the two, not that all of them aren't priorities, but the highest priorities of vacancies continue to be Public Access Cable Committee, where we are still looking for 3 members, and the Personnel Committee, which is 2 or 3 members we're looking for?
3.
3 members. So both of them are 3 members. So if you have any interest and/or skill set in these 2 areas, Public Access TV or Personnel, please fill out a talent bank form, and we are looking hopefully to have these filled, if not before, at least at the first of the year. It would be good to have those at full strength, and then I will announce other vacancies at that point. So you can get your talent bank form online or at the town clerk's office during town hall hours. 7
Chairman?
o'clock.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Another announcement, we'll talk about this again later, but again, there's 2 public forums on the Lunenburg Middle High School project, both this Thursday, one at 3 p.m. and one at 7 p.m. 2 showings. Come out for the matinee if you get time, or come out later. Again, just talking about the building, hoping everyone's getting up to date on the building, its need, its financing, and how we got to where we're at before we go to town meeting on January 7th and the election on the 11th of January. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 7 o'clock. We have an appointment, the review of the sewer intermunicipal agreement with the city of Fitchburg, and it will be presented by Mr. Carl Luck, Chair of the Sewer Commission.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Probably can't hear me. Soft talking. Hello, can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Carl Luck, and I'm representing the Sewer Commission, and we're hoping tonight to bring closure to a long task that we've been on to secure a new intermunicipal agreement between Fitchburg and Lunenburg. Okay, next slide. I'll go through these fairly quickly, but interrupt any time that we need to. Tonight's goal, as I say, is to hopefully present and get approval from the Board of Selectmen here on the proposed agreement. During this presentation, we'll go over what motivated, what's driving this change, this new agreement, what process we use, some of the key points of the agreement, not the whole agreement for sure, but some of the more important points. And then some details on the John Fitch Highway project, which is integrally related to this agreement, and then acknowledgement and thanks. Next one, Dave. Thank you. I'd like to start with acknowledgements because they're very important, and they should not get forgotten or put you to sleep and then miss them, because a lot of people made this happen over the last couple of years. To begin with, the town of Fitchburg, I would like to thank them very much. Very well supported, very cooperative. It was a good experience. Joe Jordan, who is the wastewater management manager in Fitchburg, and Rick Healy, who was the representative on their side from their sewer commission, participated in all of our meetings. We had 2 Board of Selectmen liaisons, Paula and Tom, who read this agreement more times than they probably would like to have, but on every change we reviewed with them and got their go-ahead to go to the next step. So the Board of Selectmen was very supportive for this. My co-lead, Bob Eversole, who was the chairman of the Sewer Commission when we started this a few years ago, and but stayed with me right to the end here, including helping with his presentation. Mark Reich and legal from Koppelman and Page was the attorney who was right along with us all the way, and made some very valuable inputs, and was very supportive in trying not to make it impossible to get accomplished. So very realistic, and but very thorough, fortunately. Barb, who I have to thank for a lot of things on the Sewer Commission, but our business department manager was very, very helpful in all of this. And then, of course, the rest of the sewer commissioners who had to get the updates and do the checks and so forth. Butch Bellata, Dave McDonald, who was steering the machine, Jay Simeone, and Mike Nault. So I want to thank all those people. We couldn't have got this done without that kind of effort. Okay. Some of the key objectives in the new IMA. First, the major thing driving this was capacity. We do not have enough capacity from Fitchburg in the current IMA. The capacity will not support all of the people that were bettered even, and the new developments that are coming online. So that was really the number one driver, is that we needed to secure more capacity. The second one was there were some inequities. This current agreement is quite old, and they're inadvertently, not due to any manipulation or anything else, there just happened to be some inequities as we went through it over the years, and Fitchburg acknowledged that. So our goal was to correct some of those. And then finally to secure a rate agreement where Lunenburg pays its fair share. And that was the theme right from day one, was both parties wanted Lunenburg to pay its fair share, nothing more, nothing less. And that's what I think what we're presenting here tonight. Thank you, Dave. Okay. I think I went through the participants here, Fitchburg and Lunenburg. Our liaisons, Copeland and Page was the legal. The status right now, which is the Fitchburg Sewer Commission, as well as the Legislative Affairs Committee and the City Council, have all given their tentative blessing and are prepared to sign this document if it's accepted by the Lunenburg Board of Selectmen. So that would be the next and final step if we succeed here tonight. The Lunenburg Sewer Commission clearly has voted to accept the proposed IMA, and again, once it's done here tonight, Fitchburg will sign, and I got confirmation of that again today from Joe, that as soon as he receives it, he'll have the mayor and their officials sign it. Okay, next, please. Okay, so reserve capacity. The big question in this effort was, we knew we didn't have enough, but how much did we need? And I won't go through all the details of how we got there, but I'll set the 80,000 gallons is the capacity in the current IMA. And we've projected that we need about 161,000 gallons per day of sewerage to go to Fitchburg. We're actually using about 36 of the 80,000, but that's not enough. One development will push us over that. Some of the key assumptions in the volume calculation, it's based on the CWMP that was done a few years ago, with some additional work to it, because that's a few years out of date now, and some developments have come and gone, and so we've gone through the CWMP and taken out and done new calculations on what we think we require. We also, in order to try to manage our sewer business as best we can for the sake of the people on, is we pay a much higher rate to Fitchburg, so we wanted to not send any more sewerage there than we really needed to geographically. So in this assumption, we've taken Zone 4, which is Upton and Eastern, out of what the CWMP had. So that was one change from the CWMP, and assume we're going to send that to Leominster if they come online. And then Zone 10 F will be redirected to Leominster if and when that comes online. Okay. So those are the two major assumptions from the CWMP that have modified it. It does include the Highfield Village. That was a last-minute change, but fortunately that did start to move quickly recently, and we were able to get that into the agreement, so we have that covered. And it does include 6% I&I above the water in. So we are covered there with this volume. It's not just based on how we run business today. Okay, so that was the capacity. As I said, we're going from 80,000 to 161,000 gallons per day, 10,000 gallons at the Summer Street, and then 151,000 at the 2A connection.
I'm assuming that 80 is 80,000, right?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
It's a very low use system.
Good catch, thank you. Okay, now the John Fitch Highway, as I mentioned, this is an integral part of this agreement. Unfortunately, Fitchburg needs to upgrade that John Fitch line. All of our sewage from 2A goes down John Fitch, and they don't have the capacity on that for us and even themselves, so they needed to upgrade that line anyway. So part of this IMA has us accepting some of the capital funding for that line. The new total capacity of that line will be 1,126,000 gallons a day. The total cost of that line is $2.1 million. Lunenburg's share, which is that 151,000 gallons that we are reserving that capacity for, is about 13.4%. And therefore, our cost will be 13.4% of the total, or $283,000 total over a 20-year period. I'll get into that detail later. So that's the biggest implication to this additional capacity we have, is that Fitchburg needs to upgrade that line. And we are going to have this capacity guaranteed to us as a result for as long as necessary, as opposed to the first agreement where it kind of went away if we didn't use it. Here, it'll never go away. We're buying into it up front, and it's ours. Okay. The other part of the agreement that's significant is on the fee side. Lunenburg will pay the same rate as Fitchburg residents, which is currently $7.30. There's no extra capital fees in today's agreement. There's in the prior agreement, there are capital every year. We pay additional fees to Fitchburg for capital expenditures. Everything is now included in that rate, which is the same rate that the residents pay. So there will be no additional capital costs per year, other than this John Fitch, which is a unique situation. But whatever capital Fitchburg spends going forward will be in the rate, and that's where we'll pay for it. There'll be no additional charges beyond the John Fitch. Okay. As is today, any increase in rate in Fitchburg will be passed through to us penny for penny. But we did secure, which we didn't have before, a 90-day notification. There's nothing we can do about the rate, but at least we'll have 90 days so that we can manage our business and deal with it, and we don't hear after the fact and have to tell our customers after the fact that their rates just went up. So we will get a 90-day notification on any rate increase. Okay. Unfortunately, Fitchburg's connection fees have gone up, and they're up in this agreement as well, up to $2,000. And the other big change is that the billing now, starting in January when this is signed, is that the billing between us and Fitchburg will be based upon the water we actually send to Fitchburg. So there are meters now. One of the things the Sewer Commission did is we now have 2 functioning calibrated meters on the 2 exit points from Lunenburg, and those meters will be what we pay for sewerage. And that's where the I&I becomes important, that we take into the calculation, because whatever I&I we have, we will be paying for in this agreement, which is...
For people listening at home, can you explain what I&I is?
I'm sorry. I&I is inflow and infiltration. And this is anything that comes in the system that's not intended. So I'll do my little pitch tonight. If anyone has a sump pump that they're putting into the sewer, that's not correct, and we're paying for that. We will be paying for that. If there's a cracked pipe and there's water getting directly into the system somehow, then that goes in, and that's Mrs. Bertram can help me, which that's inflow or infiltration, but any unintended water that's coming into the system is I&I. Today we bill on water that people get into their house, so there's no mechanism right now for I&I. So that's just sent to Fitchburg, and we have not been paying for it, quite frankly, which isn't right either, because it does get processed. So we need to keep the unintended water out of the system.
How's that running currently? Do we have a way to compare the meters versus what you're billing?
Yes, yeah, we put a lot of work into that. We got a lot of metering. The good news is that the lines going to Fitchburg, which are relatively new, are very good. It's less than 10%. And to Fitchburg, it's actually much less than 10%. So the 6% we use is about what we're sending to Fitchburg. So that's good. We should be able to predict that pretty well. And we are working pretty hard on even finding the sources of that and trying to reduce that. So that's a way to keep our costs down if we can do that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Dave? Okay. John Fitch highway costs, as I said, I think most of this is on the other slide, roughly 1 million gallons. We'll have 13% of it. The loan, is a 20-year loan that Fitchburg has. It costs them about $138,000 a year. Our costs will be about $18,500 a year for that loan over the 20-year period. And the first full payment is expected in FY15. There'll be a few $100s this year, but nothing significant. Thank you. Okay. Key contractual points. It's a 25-year agreement with Fitchburg, this IMA. The termination, there is a termination for convenience, that either party can terminate for convenience with 3-year notice. If that occurs, because now we have this Fitchburg payment over our head, but if for some reason Fitchburg chooses to terminate, then we're no longer responsible for that, for those costs. If we choose to terminate, we are responsible for those costs, whether we send the sewerage to Fitchburg or not. So again, it's a fair agreement. It's a fair two-way agreement. During the process, one thing about a 2-year process is things comes up during it, which fortunately we're able to catch and get into the agreement, is direct connections to Fitchburg. This is where if someone has property that's in Fitchburg and Leominster, Fitchburg and Lunenburg, they can ask Fitchburg if they were allowed to connect directly to Fitchburg. And that did occur during this process. In the agreement now, if that occurs, Fitchburg has to notify us of that case so that we are aware of it. We can't stop it, but we're aware of it at least, and we can deal with it and work with Fitchburg on it. If the lot is not 100% in Fitchburg, then we can say no. I'm sorry. If it's 100% in Lunenburg, and you can still go to Fitchburg and ask them if you can send sewerage there. We have one case like that, but we would have final approval. So Fitchburg couldn't unilaterally take sewerage from a Lunenburg residence that's 100% in Lunenburg without approval from the sewer commission. So that was a hole that needed to be plugged. Okay. And it also defines what responsibilities Fitchburg has to customers that are in Lunenburg that they choose to connect directly. So another potential hole that got plugged. Thank you, Dave. Okay. So in conclusion, we've got what I think to be a very fair agreement, a 25-year period. The capacity should go well beyond the 2026. That's just the CWMP date. We don't see anything that would change that. And we respectfully request approval from the Board of Selectmen. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Luck?
Yeah, Mr. Luck,
Yes.
the loan payment, the annual loan payment, is that covered in the various rates and fees for sewer users?
It's going to have to be. It's going to have to be in the operating budget. Okay.
Is it planned to be covered though by users or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. It's going to have to be covered by the revenue, by the income. There will be some cases where some additional costs could be offset for people coming in and obtaining access to that. Highfields, for instance, is carrying some of these costs directly. So if we have users come in that need that capacity, and within our bylaws and our agreements, we have the ability to add charges for capacity, which is exactly what this is. We had to go buy capacity, so we can flow those through in several different ways. But it could be in the base fees, in the base rate, user rate.
Any other questions for Mr. Luck?
No questions, just a comment. I wanted to thank you and everyone involved for slogging through this. I know when this all started, actually Mr. Ebersole was still the chairman of the Sewer Commission. And, at that point, it jumped right out as we looked at the existing IMA, the issues we had with capital, and we were charged here and there and somewhere else, and it was never really well defined in the IMA, where the money was going and what it was covering, and I guess it was open to interpretation, which you never want that in a contract. So this is much cleaner, much more concise, and I think it works out in the end for the town significantly better. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. On behalf of all the teams, I appreciate
Mrs.
that.
Bertram.
I just want to also thank you, and I want to thank you personally. You've pointed out everyone except yourself, and having worked with you on the Sewer Commission, I know the countless hours you worked on this, and I know all of the hours you've put in putting together a very well thought out and thorough agreement. So I want to thank you for all of your dedication on the Sewer Commission for all of these years.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And I'd like to echo Mrs. Bertram's and Mr. Matthews' feelings too. When Lunenburg first got involved with sewers, we really didn't know very much about sewers. And when the sewer commissions were finally broken off away from the Board of Selectmen, and we had a separate sewer commission, it really started getting the ball rolling on us taking it more seriously. And now, this many years into it, I think it's probably 6 or 7 years at least with the separate sewer commission. This has been one of the first things that was identified many years ago, and now that the IMA came up, that we really are closing loopholes that, again, we didn't really know existed back then, and we were fortunate by the way they worked with us, the city of Fitchburg. So I'd like to thank the whole sewer commission, both present and previous ones who worked on this, because it was a long process to review this, and it was a pleasure working with you all in reviewing it. And I think you're absolutely correct in saying it really is a fair and equitable agreement on everybody's side, not just Lunenburg's, but I think from Fitchburg's side too. So I thank them for their participation and cooperation in coming forward with this, and I certainly would support it, do support it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ebersol.
just a point of history, I actually believe that Paula was chair of the sewer commission when we actually started the discussion of this, so it predates
way
me.
back.
So the theory of it was discussed many times. We knew that there was time to do this, and the current IMA actually goes on for a few years, so this was actually, we're not under the gun, so this was really a good example of planning that the sewer commission did to do it before it expired. And the fact of the matter is that the John Fitch improvement is effectively, we're paying for that in order to buy the capacity for what we need to do for the current obligations and the future ones. So I think that it's a good deal for us. It's clarify things with Fitchburg. Fitchburg's happy with it as well, so congratulations.
Well, as a prior chair, Mr. Ebersol, I would give you the opportunity to offer a motion on the IMA agreement as presented by Mr. Luck and the Sewer Commission.
I would move that the board approve and execute the intermunicipal agreement for sewer with the city of Fitchburg as
Second.
presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. How many copies? 5.
I'm going to say thank you all very much and sit down. I appreciate it.
Yes, that was done by a Uniball Signo pen for those. We should have interlude music.
That's right. What's that? Love that dirty water? Oh,
Wow. Let's see if the booth can cue that up in time.
that's right.
He's working on it, didn't you hear?
So it's 7:30, just to prepare everybody, we'll have the status update from the Building Reuse Committee. Oh, yes, sure. The 7:15 appointment with the Conservation Commission will be continued to next week?
No,
Or-
I don't have a date.
Okay, it will be continued at a future Board of Selectmen meeting. Did you know that your twin brother serves on this board?
I do. We ready?
We are ready. All
Thank you.
yours.
Okay, this is the presentation of the Building Reuse Committee. The members of the committee, I chair the committee, ably assisted by Pat Slattery, who is the vice chair, Damon McQuaid, the clerk, Joe Levine, Ron Albert, Dave McDonald, Steve Raboyne, Todd Blake, and Deb Seeley. I'd like to offer special thanks to John Wanda, who was an enormous help to the committee with assessments of existing costs and required capital expenditures for town-owned properties. Scott Curley, from all state abatement professionals, who provided detailed estimates on costs of asbestos abatement and demolition. Jay Lord from Maple Rock, who provided valuable insight on possible commercial uses of the properties and the process for preparing RFP templates. Both Scott and Jay assisted at no cost to the town. As part of the discussion of the proposed middle high school building project, the Board of Selectmen created a building reuse committee and assigned them the tasks of reviewing the town's space needs for municipal services, reviewing long and short-term repair and maintenance costs, and identifying property and buildings that could be surplus. If surplus properties are identified, detailed marketing plans for those properties should be developed. I'd like to review each of the properties, beginning with the Eagle House Senior Center. The Eagle House building is approximately 4,000 square feet. It sits on the school campus behind the T.C. Passios building and the library. The exact dimensions of the land plot would need to be determined if a land parcel currently part of the Eagle House and T.C. Passios were to be marketed. It costs approximately $21,000 a year to run the Eagle House and requires average maintenance costs. The Eagle House has been determined to be suitable for current and future needs per the Director and the Council on Aging. The Brooks House is approximately 3,900 square feet, and it also sits on the school campus in front of the T.C. Passios building and next to the library. The exact dimensions of the land plot would also need to be determined if the land parcel were to be marketed. The current tenant covers the annual operating costs, and no maintenance or repair is planned at this time. The building is currently underutilized, but would require significant investment to be retrofitted for public access as a municipal building or office. The Ritter Memorial Building. The Ritter Building is approximately 6,000 square feet and sits on 1.1 acre, but the exact dimensions of the land plot would need to be determined if the land parcel were to be marketed. It costs approximately $20,000 per year to operate, and it's scheduled for $20,000 to $65,000 of repairs over the next 3 to 5 years. That's the requests that are part of the capital planning process and have not been formally approved at present. The Ritter houses 6 employees in the various land use departments of the town. TC Passios Building. The TC Passios Building is approximately 57,500 square feet and sits on a plot estimated to be 8 acres. The Passios Building costs $120,000 per year to run and is currently generating $36,000 in income from short-term tenants, PAC and the FLLAC, FLAC Collaborative. John Launder estimates that over $2.5 million would be required to make long-term repairs to keep the building for long-term use. Total demolition of the building would cost over $900,000 due to asbestos, and any partial abatement or construction could cost, our estimates, $875 per square foot, up to approximately $500,000. I should note that all the dollar figures we're using for estimates are 2013 dollars. And if it occurs sometime in the future, we'd have to adjust that for that. Town Hall. Town Hall is approximately 6,500 square feet and sits on 0.15 acres. And it costs approximately $30,000 per year to run. It derives $32,000 per year in revenue for the cell transmitters that are located in the clock tower. Plans have been drawn up in the past to repair and renovate the building at costs ranging from $2 to $10 million, depending on how extensive a renovation is planned. With renovation, all town municipal offices could be co-located in the town hall. Costs would depend on the extent of work planned, but could be done in the $1 to $2.5 million range, and could be higher if plans were used to utilize more than the current 2 floors that are utilized. I'd like to discuss the committee's recommendation for each of the properties that we were asked to review. The Eagle House requires no action at this time. It meets the needs of the senior center now and will continue to do so in the future. The Brooks House is underutilized, and the cost to bring it up to code as a municipal building would be prohibitive. The Brooks House sits on a prime location, and if a parcel were to be marketed as the 1.5 acres, it's a little hard to see, but the bottom piece of just the Brooks House is shown on Mass Ave, it should be very attractive as a commercial property. Estimates are that a bank, for instance, may pay as much as $500,000 for that property. The Ritter Building is also underutilized, and the 6 employees could be moved into a renovated town hall. A parcel of land that would include the current Ritter and the former police and fire property could be marketed as approximately 1.1 acres at the intersection of Massachusetts and Lancaster Avenues. A restaurant or other town center entity could be interested in this property. I should mention that a full RFP or request for proposal process would be used to determine the best use of all of these parcels. And after setting criteria, we kind of put it out and see if a developer or an interested party had an idea that perhaps we hadn't even thought of for use of some of these marketable properties. The TC Passios Building is the property with the highest cost to the town. The $120,000 annual cost, along with the $2.5 million cost to repair and maintain the 57,459 square feet for ongoing municipal use, is not justified. Currently, municipal activities that are handled in Town Hall, the Ritter, and Brooks House use only 6,400 square feet today. And it's projected that the 21 non-school town employees that are in those 3 buildings could be housed in a renovated town hall. The almost $1 million cost to demolish the building for use as fields or open space is also difficult to justify. The TC Passios property could be marketed for sale through a detailed request for proposal process, and the developer proposals could be for appropriate uses in one or several parcels, and could be in conjunction with the Brooks House property or as a standalone. This proposed drawing shows the TC Passios property configured into 3 separate offerings of 15,000 square foot, 9,375 square foot, and 12,700 square feet, with proposed parking in the middle of the complex. Marketed as one or several properties, the Passios might be of interest to developers or buyers, such as FLAC or other schools or collaboratives, daycare facilities, senior care or senior assisted living, office space, or other appropriate development. Town Hall. It's the recommendation of the Building Reuse Committee to make a long-term commitment to retrofit and repair Town Hall to house municipal offices now located in other reuse buildings. Okay. While the repair, renovation, and retrofit costs would be significant, we recommend that the town could partially offset these costs with any savings on operating costs, ongoing maintenance, and reduced future capital expenditures on the buildings that we're calling surplus. In addition, as surplus buildings were marketed, they'd re-enter the revenue stream as taxable properties. Any income from sales of surplus buildings would also go towards the town hall renovation, or could also go towards the town hall renovation. Okay. As far as next steps go, we believe we should communicate our findings. In fact, a video of using the data in this presentation with any input from tonight's meeting will be posted by PAC on their YouTube site and used as the Selectmen and School Committee see fit. And we believe we need to assign staff work if we're to go forward in the areas of work on developing a detailed go-to-market strategy and RFP template for developing the surplus properties, a consolidation plan for town functions and offices that could be consolidated and built and moved into town hall, and a cost and investment decision on the extent of town hall renovations to be made. Some specific open items are a need for a cross-department record management plan and process. One of the things we learned as we talked to each of the organizations in the various town buildings is they all have records needs and existing record storage that would need to be analyzed and perhaps managed for efficiency and possibilities of centralized records management. That's work that was not done by the committee, but we believe it should be done and could be part of a future plan. It's also important that we ensure that the location for open meetings, such as the selectmen meetings, planning board meetings, zoning board of appeals, etc., have a place in our long-term plan, a place for voting. Those meetings should have access to PAC television coverage. We believe that the superintendent's offices are covered. We're making the assumption that the superintendent's offices and staff are covered in the school properties going forward. If not the middle high school, one of the school properties. And we also believe that a plan like this, the entire building reuse plan is such that we would very definitely need to work with the various planning committees, the school committee, zoning committee, planning committees, all of the land use committees to be able to ensure that we could move forward on any of these proposals. And that is the work of the Building Reuse Committee. All or most of our committee is here, and we're all available to answer any questions or
I will
discussion.
open up the floor from the board for questions, but first I want to say, as we have said for other boards, I mean, thank you for the work. That's a lot of data. And I know we gave you guys a short window to work in because it was obviously in conjunction with the upcoming special town meeting, school, middle school, high school vote and ballot. So thank you for your presentation, everybody's work on it. Obviously, it's very apparent the amount of time that was spent on it considering it, so thank you. Questions from the board?
Just want to add before that to the thanks. I want to thank Jamie. This is something that I actually brought up that we needed to accomplish, to look at, to put a committee together, and Jamie jumped up and grabbed the ball and ran with it, thank God. So he's done a wonderful job with it. A lot of good work here. We have a wonderful committee, a whole range of skills that came to this. We've got a level of detail into this that we'd struggle to get otherwise. And I just want to thank you all for putting countless hours into this. I think we have a good start to a good plan going forward with more questions to come through. But with that said, I'll come back for questions later, perhaps.
I want to also thank you for the work that you've done, and I'm going to jump right into a couple questions. One of the things you noted at the end was one of the open items is the location for open meetings, and looking at the square footage that you identified for the Ritter and the Town Hall, it looks like there's 6,000 square feet at the Ritter and 6,500 square feet at the Town Hall. So obviously combining those two spaces, I'm assuming, is going to eliminate this meeting space, and this would become office space. One of the concerns that I have, and I think we have to look at it going forward, is the ability for, conservation planning this office. While granted, our meetings are not very well attended, because I think a lot of people watch them on TV. I know, having been in attendance at conservation hearings or planning board meetings, the room can be packed because they're issues that abutters are dealing with or that neighbors are dealing with. So that's something we're going to have to take into account when we look at meeting space. Additionally, the planning board, I know that they use that conference table a lot for peer meetings. They have these peer review meetings regularly. So we need to make sure that we maintain a significant amount of conference rooms to facilitate those type of meetings. And I'm just wondering, if we were to renovate this building and take all of the departments that are currently at the Ritter, how would we do that? And when you looked at the redesigning this space, did you include a conference room to accommodate those types of peer meetings?
Fine. The existing space that's used for the 20-something town employees, the non-school town employees, adds up to about 16,000 square feet. And that's the Brooks, the Ritter, and Town Hall, and the small group of non-school related, maybe 1 or 2 employees in Passios. All right, but it adds up to 16,000 square feet. So that's kind of the high end, if we could kind of put them all together in some way. We have made an assessment that needs further review, that to house all the town employees, including the land use, ideally would require somewhere in the area of 10,000 to 12,000, maybe 11,000 square feet. Okay, the renovation plans that were developed back in 1990 talked to making 3 floors in this building usable, plus adding a 13-foot extension on all 3 floors in the back of the building. So now, the price tag that goes along with that in today's dollars, we estimate, would be north of $5 million. So the answer to your question, Ms. Bertram, is somewhere in the middle. We believe that we could shoehorn people into this building for $1.5 million to $2.5 million, but that's not our proposal. Our proposal is to look at the potential revenue sources of developing surplus buildings, look at the partial offset as reduced operating costs, and make some long-term decisions on doing some renovations here that would in fact accommodate conference rooms, office space, etc. As part of our project, I did visit one other town hall in Ashland and have some pictures from there, and have started a relationship with the facilities manager in Ashland. They, about 9 years ago, reconfigured their entire town hall to a 3-floor building and have both the open meeting space and the office space and conference rooms, etc. Now, their cost was in the area of $5 million. We're not proposing that, but there's a lot of distance between $1.5 million and $5 million that we believe that if the concept is approved and we want to go forward, that we could work, or someone could work. I'm not going to commit my team, but someone could work on putting together a plan that would address those needs. Certainly, we would want to address all those needs.
Okay.
Okay. Did anybody want to add anything to that?
Before we move, I'd like to just make a...
Yes.
If I could just make a comment, because I think for anybody listening at home, you mentioned 20 municipal employees and 16,000 square feet.
Right.
So that sounds ridiculous, and I wouldn't want anybody to think that we have 20 municipal employees that are using 16,000 square feet of office space. Anybody who's been in Town Hall or the Ritter or the Brooks, which is not even really used, you know there's a significant amount of meeting space in the buildings. The corridors, the hallways are much wider than they need to be. So we certainly aren't using 800 square feet per
Absolutely.
municipal
I'm sorry if I gave that
employee. No, I just
Absolutely.
had to say that.
One of the other questions that I had is looking at marketing the Ritter, and I don't know that you guys have investigated this, or perhaps the town manager knows. I know that was gifted to the town, and I believe it came with a number of restrictions within that gifting. And I'm just wondering what our ability to sell that property is. Is that something you guys investigated, or that would need further research?
We had some discussion about that. It would require further discussion. I think it would be important to get, all the various land use committees to do their due diligence on each aspect of it, including the Historic Commission and people that have applied for state grants and people that know about restrictions on bequeaths, etc. An interesting fact, we came up with is that one of the restrictions that we believe was on the Ritter is that it be used as a library. So I think we're already in kind of gray territory when we look at that, but we would have to do that work. It is agreed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Ingersoll.
Oh, sorry.
4 points. Just to answer that part, if there are restrictions, we may need to work with our legislative delegation, because the general court or we may need to go to court to relieve those restrictions to make sure that the title would be clear. So, it's not impossible to do, especially with the understanding is that we wouldn't be taking the building down. That's my assumption, which is comment 2, is that I know you've got the historical commission involved in this, and that certainly maintaining the concept of the town center and the various other buildings that are historic. I'm assuming that'll be part of the RFP process. I'm actually rather excited about the fact of having one building instead of 4. That by itself, similar to the discussion about the schools, having fewer buildings to maintain. You have one roof, you have one furnace, you have one electric. There's a lot of benefits beyond the concept of saving space. I actually was on the committee back when they came up with plans to renovate this building, and part of the discussion was, what can we actually do with this? And it actually has quite a bit of capacity. I also welcome the opportunity that we may have the ability, as we address the meeting space of wherever that is located, whether here and over in some of the schools or something else, that we may be able to create additional television spaces so that public committees can be televised on a regular basis without interference with their operation. Kudos to the committee. I know you've done I stopped in at a couple of meetings, and I knew the work that you were doing. It was a very hard-working committee, and everybody was involved. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that we have this before the discussion on the schools. I think it's a realistic plan. Details can be discussed among all the various people and what would happen with the market and RFP. But I think that it's very good that we have a plan that we would be able to go to people and talk about at town meeting. Not that town meeting is going to vote this, but the concern has always been, what are you going to do with the empty buildings? And we have a plan before they're fully empty. So thank you.
I would agree with Mr. Ebersol. I would say that the only one of the main criteria that I look at this plan with is, we separated people out from this building into the Ritter Building because of space issues. And the space issues are created, as the town manager said, because there's a lot of meeting space. And meeting space is not everyday working space, but you can't double use it either. So you can't use it in the day and then reset the chairs at night or something. So we have to be very careful with that, because we do, that opened up a lot of space, and especially when the library went on their semi-austerity budget, that some of the meeting space was lost over there. It was really hard pressed to get meeting space, and that's critical. So that's the only concern I have. I think that the proposal you have is very workable. I'd like to see what the final plans of the town hall would be, not before we make any vote, but just that would be the next step, to make sure that, because this is one of those puzzles that you have to move the tiles around. You still got to have people working while you're renovating, so you need spaces for all these things to happen in the meantime, too. But I mean, the work that's gone into that, those are the details that Mr. Ebersol referenced that I agree with. I mean, I think those are the things to flesh out, but I think the overall plan is a very good one. So thank you. Mrs. Bertram.
Two follow-up questions. One on the Ritter. The recommendation is to market that, to do an RFP, and you talked about the plot of land, and that's the plot of land that housed the Ritter as well as the old police station. Is it your recommendation to maintain that building, and would the RFP specify that building would have to stay, or was it the intent that it would be up to the individual who responded to the RFP, or whatever the best bid was? Just
Comes the reinforcements.
When we send out the RFP, hopefully they'll keep the original part of the building, the Ritter Building. It's a beautiful building. But again, when you send out an RFP, and it's not just a regular RFP that would go to you, it would be a nationwide thing. It would be a big development. And so our hope would be that a developer would come and save the integrity of the building. Could be an office building, it could be a restaurant, but the integrity would be there. But you can't put that in the RFP. And as far as the meeting spaces, we did talk about the planning board, by the way, specifically, and even talking with Ron and Pat, even what you have now you have here, existing, could be reworked to make everything fit. So don't look at a $5 million plan. You got to go with what you have now and then build from there, what is needed. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I guess I just want to understand. I understand that when we put out the RFP, it goes, it's whoever responds to the RFP, but I'm going back to the Jones House, and I'm not familiar with the RFP process, and I know you are. But I know when we did the RFP for the Jones House, we did put the RFP out with the restriction that the building had to be maintained, that the integrity of the building on the exterior had to be maintained. It was up to the individuals what they did with the interior, but there were a number of restrictions. And I would just say that personally, and I know that this has to be fleshed out as we go forward, I would hate to see the Ritter Building demolished. Certainly, it would be renovated. There would be, and I would love to, personally, I would love to see a restaurant there, but that's just me. So I think that, obviously going forward, we have to understand that there would be changes, but I also think we have to balance our historical significant buildings at the same time.
I think, Pat, if you can come up and answer that one, that's a good question for you, Pat.
Good evening, Pat Slattery, Chairman of the Historical Commission, and having been the instigator, if you would, with the Jones House project, yeah, there were specific historic requirements to maintain the building and the windows and true divided light and all of that stuff. And personally, I would like to see the same criteria applied to the Ritter Building, speaking, I'm sure, for the Historical Commission. Probably for the planning board, probably for the town center committee. For any committee, we want to maintain the what we have for a town center, and that Ritter Building is a main piece situated on that corner. So Did we get into that level of specificity with respect to the committee? No. And some of us, I think, would say, hey, you know, it's all fair. You know, put it out there. If someone wants to tear it down and do something else, that's up to them. If that were to be the proposal, the Historical Commission for sure would take the opposite stance. So I think that's the next level. That's something we have to look at, but or someone has to look at. But I think from the Historical Commission standpoint, we would favor keeping the building as is and working with that.
I think to also add a different aspect to your question, Mrs. Bertram, I think the point is that the town, when we go out to RFP, as the RFP for the Jones House shows, and we have the authority to make any restrictions that we want to put out there. It's just a matter of what we think people, if we're putting it out there so people will look at buying it, what is the balance between those two? So that's the discussion we need to have, and I think it'll have a historic perspective and an economic perspective.
Mr. Chairman, just continuing on the Ritter Building, the other, excuse me, the other thing to note is that the addition to the library was put on in the 60s. May not quite be that 50-year point, so the Historical Commission could be involved and say you're allowed to take that addition down and do other things with the building, going back to the early building itself. So there's ways to do it and still have enough land in order to make it commercially viable.
One other question. Throughout the process, you talked about the need to identify the boundaries of the land on all of the parcels you guys are looking at. Do you, and I don't know if you did this, and again, I might be going to the phases of the next step, but my question is, any idea of the cost associated with surveying those properties and identifying those boundaries? Because that's obviously going to affect the marketability of those properties. And so do we have any estimates on what that would cost, is to flush out what those boundaries are?
Well, let me give you a general answer, and then I'm going to ask the committee to make a guesstimate on costs. One is, as I understand the process, any property that's currently school property, for instance, the school committee would have to declare that as surplus from their point of view. Town meeting would have to agree to move it to the general control of the selectmen, and then we would have the ability to market it. So part of that, just that discussion alone, would require us to get a line drawn that we knew which property we're talking about when we have that discussion. In addition to that, an RFP, once we have the big boundaries drawn, an RFP could in fact put the whole property up for an RFP to see what potential developers would want to do with the whole property, and that would require less individual surveying. Whereas if we wanted to market the Brooks house separate from the Passios property, you then begin to have to make some arbitrary decisions and have that eventually surveyed. In terms of an estimate of cost, I'm going to ask my committee to make a shot at that.
Good evening, Ron Albert, committee member number 6. One of the interesting things about an RFP, and we talked about this, is that you could put an RFP out and ask the developer, when it gets down to the final details, to provide the survey as part of the submittal to the town, so that if you get interested in a developer and you get a final cut list of, say, 3 people, and then you decide just how much of the parcel you're going to subdivide, say, for a particular piece. And let's just talk about the Brooks house. We look at that as almost a natural division of about 1.5 acres, with the land that's abutting the library. That line is defined. Mass Ave is defined. The driveway to the present school property is defined. And there's what I call a transverse driveway. So those things are more or less defined. And I think if properly prepared, an RFP could kind of frame that question, and then the precise survey details with precise lot lines could be described in work that would be basically paid for by the developer subject to the town's approval. So trying always, as a good committee, to put the cost onto, the private sector, if that's the way we think the things will go. And there's still some opportunity, perhaps, for municipal use. We're not ruling that out, but to the extent that we could let them define it and pay for that definition, subject to approval, that would be one way of doing it.
Thank you.
Another
Mrs.
question.
Bertram. Yes.
Looking at, and I'm going to focus on the Brooks House and the school, and the planning board is currently in the process of working on the master plan and looking at zoning and all of that, and I'm sure that's something that you guys looked at throughout this process, and obviously the zoning is not there for business, and I guess I'm looking for a recommendation or a suggestion from you guys as moving forward, what makes sense from a zoning perspective for that area. I'm assuming you're looking at a commercial zone, however, that might be an assumption that's incorrect. I mean, are you looking at limited business, or are you looking at commercial, or when you looked at reallocating and marketing these, did you identify what types of uses the market's going to bear and what makes sense from a zoning perspective?
I'm Damon McQuaid, I also serve on the planning board. We talked about it at our meetings as far as, also in processes, we're trying to develop a village district zoning area in town to better stimulate commercial activity in our downtown area. Relying more heavily on mixed use facilities, smaller facilities, like you see when you drive to Concord or Groton or something like that nature, that would fit with the historic character of our town center. And when it comes to that property, we spoke about that as well, that a good town center district should be able to address any use for that potential future use of the Passios building. So we're confident in whatever we have planned for the main part of the town center should be relevant to that as well.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add one other thing, is that I met, and several of us had meetings with different members of the town departments and boards. I met with Mike Savageau at the building department. We just talked about the zoning perspective and what is current, and professionally I've had quite a bit of experience in that arena as well. And you can't take a piece of property generally and make it non-conforming, so we know that. But there may be some proposals out there that would be so dynamic and exciting that as a community, if we are able to, through the Board of Selectmen on through the land use boards and committees, to better understand what that may mean, we may be clearer in our forward thinking as to how to react to that. And so overlay districts, or I don't want to say spot zoning, but a way to massage the zoning, if you will, may be a factor. And we'll just have to wait and see, I would suggest.
So
Thank you.
this building has been kind of seen as just town hall use going forward. I'm assuming that's because of historical value, because of town sentiment and lack of marketability? Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say.
Okay, so the other sites would be more marketable for other uses.
Correct.
Okay. What I like about this, of course, this goes back to, it's connected to the school building plan, in that if the new middle school, high school is built, TC Passios becomes obsolete to the school, or surplus to the school needs. If that does not pass, then TC Passios quickly becomes a school building again. It has to be reopened because capacity is at its limits currently, so we're going to have to reopen that as a school, so that's going to totally come off any discussion for any of the use, and instead we'll be talking about spending $8 million plus renovating that in the not too distant future as a school facility. But the good news is, beyond that, even if that happens, there's still opportunities if we want to pursue them. I don't know if the Brooks House then at that point could be surplus or not, depends on the school needs. But if we can look at the Ritter, anything we can do as a community to downsize our physical operations, to help develop commercial growth and development in the town, especially town center. I know everyone's got that as a shared goal, or it seems to be that way. And anything we can do to minimize costs. So, I mean, if that includes having to take a different look at what we do for meeting space, what we do for storage, you know, do we digitize more records and have less paper? I know a lot of paper's got to be here. Do we expand storage areas, which are lower cost than office areas? Do we, you know, look at making better use of our existing meeting spaces already throughout the town? Because there's spaces throughout, you know, the library, even with budget woes, there's no reason why we can't make fuller use of that meeting space. Have to accommodate it in the budget, you know, with maintenance, janitorial, setup, that type of thing. There's no reason we can't use the common spaces in the Turkey Hill Middle School cafeteria, gymnasiums, the schools. You know, again, we need to step away from some of the dividing lines over who owns what space. And we need to work together and get the best response, the best result for the taxpayer. So, especially if we're asking them for a significant investment in this high school, middle school, we got to do everything we can, no matter how uncomfortable it gets, to change how we do business. And, you know, I've been saying that for years, and I think this is a great step toward that. So.
Any other comments, any questions for the board, for the committee, I should ask? Thank you. Again.
Thank you.
It's our expectation that at the conclusion of this meeting, I'll update the discussion we had and make it part of this presentation. If you choose, we'll proceed with the plan to make a PAC-produced video on the process if you choose to go forward. But I think we'd like to thank very much, especially personally, the committee, and disband them appropriately, if that's okay.
Well, I think we're going to keep them until the town meeting, special town meeting.
You thought you were out.
That's okay.
I tried.
We pulled you back in. You know, I think it would be helpful if we could. I think, you know, Paula pointed out the question about surveying, engineering, plot lines, et cetera. You know, could we get an idea of what it would perhaps cost to get some valuations of the properties? You know, if we were to go to market, so we have some idea in the RFPs what we can be looking for. You know, I don't know if that can be part of this committee doing that or town manager, but I think that's something we need to get a better idea of. You know, what do we get some real advice for what's the real value of some of these buildings?
Speaking as a selectman, there's so many variables, it's hard to do that. As variables start getting solidified, I think that becomes a more doable task.
Okay.
And I would suggest that we wait until we know what the results of the town meeting and election vote, and then kind of that will help one variable,
Okay.
and then we can begin the rest.
Sure.
And I would ask, because this is the first time we're hearing from the Building Reuse Committee, if anybody in the public has any questions or comments. Thank you very much again for all that, and let us know when that is on YouTube with your comments and everything. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Okay, current business, review and approve the ballot question. Ballot question, part of our...
It is I have a draft copy of the full warrant, and the election ballot is included on the second to last page of that warrant document.
Second, I don't have it.
So maybe I could just read the question because it is short enough. So question 1 on the ballot would be, shall the town of Lunenburg be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2 1/2, so-called, the amounts required to pay for the bonds issued in order to construct a 169,018, I can't even say that. You know what I mean.
You did say it.
Square foot school designated for 820 students in grades 6 through 12, Lunenburg Middle/High School, on parcel ID 162-60-55. That's the map block and lot. 1079 Massachusetts Avenue, Lunenburg, Massachusetts 01462. This language comes to us directly from the MSBA. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room. The MSBA has reviewed and approved this language. It is in front of bond counsel at this point in time. I've had a number of questions about how come the dollar amount's not there? How come, if you look at the warrant article, the language is more extensive. And I'm not sure that you've seen the suggested motion that will occur at town meeting, which is even longer. Why is the ballot question the most important question, the shortest question? And the answer is this is what is legally required by state law and the MSBA for this type of ballot question for this purpose. It doesn't include the dollar amount. It doesn't include whether the project's financed over 20 or 30 years, how long we do temporary financing versus permanent financing. This is the legal requirement and what the MSBA supports. Doesn't mean you can't talk about other things, you can't have data on other things, but this is what will go on the ballot.
So can we add the number or not?
I can ask that question. I don't believe so.
And personally, at least, I would recommend that we stay completely in the confines of what the MSBA is recommending. That's what I would do.
Can we add a note with the dollar amount?
I will ask them, whatever you come up with this evening, I'll make sure that we ask them, can we add X, Y, or Z?
I mean, if we do, if the board votes to recommend approval, can we set the dollar amount? Can we just, it bothers, people can get this at home and say, well, how much? Mm-hmm. And I know they can come to town meeting and find out, but it seems kind of unfair. And I know there's plenty of ways they can get it if they look.
Right.
But if this is going to be an inclusive document, I think it should be an inclusive document, or as inclusive as we can be.
My understanding is that this is true of any capital override. You don't have the dollar amount in there.
No. The ones we've done for the town have always.
They've always had the dollar amount.
Okay.
But they've been town initiatives and not under some larger state process.
Yeah. I also want to mention, because we had talked before about this was your last opportunity to address the warrant, and you do have next week as well. Now that we have the warrant together, we know the size of the warrant. We've sent a draft to the printer. We know that we can accommodate whatever activity you want to take place at next week's meeting, but it's going to have to go to the printer either Wednesday or Thursday. The Finance Committee, well, no, not Thursday. The Finance Committee is not having a meeting on this until the 19th. So really, a week from tomorrow, it needs to go to the printer.
If you look at the state ballot, I think that there's a question, and then there's sort of like an English language, not the information to voters that's sent out, but I think on some of the ballots that they have the question, and then they have a nonpartisan discussion about what it is, and that may be the opportunity for us to have the article, the warrant, and meet the state law, but then also have, as Dave suggested, language that would explain it a little further.
But my fear is, as a voter, if I got this and there wasn't a number, I would be annoyed. I'd be angry. Yeah. I'd be frustrated that I didn't have that in front of me. And I don't want to.
I think I would feel as a voter that I'm approving whatever it takes to construct that many square feet, and you could change the number on me.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I don't want to approve that or disapprove that.
Exactly, and that's my fear as well, is it's an open-ended number. So, from a voting perspective, you get this at home, I'm just giving them a blank check. That's what it looks like.
Right.
And clearly, some of the language could be as the amount voted at town meeting, or you know, if you could add that language in the explanatory down below, and it would be not include the amounts that the MSB is reimbursing, because we're only going to borrow the town's share, because that's the other discussion that people were concerned, is that, you know, here's the full project, but the fact is we're only borrowing the town's share. So we want to be clear in the ballot that when somebody walks in, they have all the information.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I understand what fellow members are saying, and I certainly do, but I think that one of the reasons having not been the one who decided this language in the MSBA process, I think part of the reasoning was that a project of this magnitude will have so much opportunity and so much press for what the cost is, what the elements are, and it's a complex thing. And to try to summarize that complex thing by putting the whole number and then explaining to people you're only voting for half of that goes more to confusing something that's complex that you need to have a lot of time to study on your own, and that you should, as a voting member, study on your own, than to try to encapsulate. Because I think it would prove to be too large. And if the question is as large as the town meeting warrant, you'll just scare people away. They won't even read it at all. So I think they do this in a matter that there are other mechanisms in place before you even get to the ballot that you can get all that information. I know that's my feeling about why they probably went this way.
I think you can get that information. I think quite often people don't. You know, and it is what it is. I mean, people don't necessarily read all the papers. They don't watch us. And hard to imagine as that is. You know, and I think it could be as simple as, you know, project cost, MSBA portion, local town cost. Simple. It doesn't have to be involved.
Right.
I just think the more, again, we see this every year at town meeting, the more forthcoming we are with data, numbers, costs, the easier it is to get through it, because people aren't coming in wound up, angry, and frustrated. So if there's a way, Carrie, if you could double check before next week,
Yep.
please.
Okay, so we're bypassing that until next week. So then we go to the recommendation, the review, and the order of the warrant, articles, and make recommendations. So we have okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, we have 3 articles that were submitted, which I think probably will end up being 2. We have the school project, and then we have 2 that were submitted by the planning board to amend the zoning bylaw to create a new subsection entitled medical marijuana treatment centers, and then also to impose a moratorium on these for a year period of time. And I think I think it's really 1 article, but it came over as 2, and so I'm still working on that. So obviously you're going to take...
I think it has to be 2 because of what they're doing, just technically.
Well, except that I think the entirety of the 2nd article is repeated in the 3rd article. So we'll get that taken care of. But obviously the 2 subjects, and you're going to either take 1 first, and then 2 and 3, or 2 and 3 and 1.
See what I mean? This is what happens when you explain articles. I'm perfectly fine with the order the way it is right now. And if one of those, if number 2 or number 3 goes away, or they get combined, I don't see how they get combined, but if they get combined, that's fine, as long as number 1 is number 1.
I agree.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so do we want to read this article? Is this the exact article now? Wasn't it supposed to have some lengthy description?
That'll be the motion. The motion has to have more
Right.
language when it gets to actually
Okay,
how
got
you're
it.
Right,
appropriating
and we're
borrowing and
still working on
eminent
the
domain and all
motions.
that type of thing.
So Article 1 is to see if the town will vote to appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money to be expended under the direction of the school building committee for construction of a 169,018 square foot school designated for 820 students in grades 6 through 12, Lunenburg Middle High School on parcel, I'll skip that, 1079 Massachusetts Avenue, Lunenburg, Mass. 01462, which school facility shall have an anticipated useful life as an educational facility for the instruction of school children of at least 50 years, and for which the town may be eligible for a school construction grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA. The MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need, as determined by the MSBA, and any project costs the town incurs in excess of the grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town. Any grant that the town of Lunenburg may receive from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 59.11% of eligibility approved project costs as determined by the MSBA, or 2, the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA.
So,
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that this board recommend approval of this article.
do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion of this article?
Were we going to get more information for clarification? Or was that going to be in addition to, on the dollar amounts? We just talked about adding dollar amounts somehow, somewhere. Have we decided that they'll be separate from the article?
Well, for this, I assumed we were going to, like we do for annual town meeting, we have additional information in the warrant. And I just threw in the flyer that the school building committee has put together. Now, I don't know that that is what will go in. There was a question asked about whether or not that document is appropriate. Certainly, we'd have to have council agree to it. I don't see where it's inappropriate because it's not. It wasn't put together by a political action committee. It's stating facts on the project. But I assume there would be some sort of report that would be included in the warrant.
Well, here is where, unlike the warrant, unlike the ballot question, here is where I'd recommend that we put, because they're talking about splitting percentages already in the article, I think we should put the total cost of the project, at the very least. I mean, anything else, any report, I think should be forthcoming, and I think should be available either in the warrant itself as a separate item or as a handout at special town meeting. But in the warrant article itself, we should have the total amount. That's my opinion.
I agree.
The total amount of the project in the
Right,
warrant article.
right.
Okay, I will ask, and again, the MSBA approves the language in the warrant article as well, so,
And they approve the motion as well?
and the motion, as
Do they approve the
does
vote?
bond counsel.
What about the discussion?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
So part of the discussion is that would mean that it would be 76 million?
72 million.
72 million with.
2 million.
And so, because technically we have to appropriate the entire amount, even though we won't be borrowing the entire amount.
Right. But the article, as it is already written, talks about the split. So,
well,
We got to be careful because it's not an exact 59.1% split because
It's
well,
available.
or, because it has a
some
number
things are
2.
reimbursed.
Well, yeah, I understand.
But it's going to be, significantly different. It's about a 50% actual.
and that's going to be
reimbursement.
flushed out during the discussion. But it's unfortunate that the motion has to be so restricted, so we can't make it clear what it is that we're looking at borrowing.
The wording as they've written it here is exactly correct. Okay, because it talks about eligible approved project costs.
I understand that,
So,
Tom.
all I'm saying is that in the motion as it stands right now, they are talking about coverage of splitting expenses in the grant program, so there's no reason, I would find, why that split means nothing, or that kind of coverage of eligible costs means nothing to somebody if you don't know what the cost of the project is.
And they do, I mean, in the language they give you, it's all of this, and they list, you identify what the project is. And they give you, it needs to include the school name, the description of the location, the address, the scope of the project. I would think the scope of the project, the cost of the
Would be the
project
cost of the
goes
project.
something towards scope.
That's
And
the
so-
motion?
No, this is,
This is the question?
this is the article.
Right.
So, we certainly can put that forward. I asked for school administration to provide, the scope, the project.
Right.
And so, we will go back to the MSBA to make sure that the scope of the project can include the cost of the project, which makes sense.
One would think.
So again, now, we have till next week to decide this? Is that correct for our recommendation?
Yes.
I mean, I mean, as one member of this board, I think I've known the project long enough that the wording of the article is not going to change my recommendation of the article.
I'm gonna vote yes to recommend approval on this. We're gonna finalize the
Right.
verbiage in the end. Ultimately, yes, I'm recommending approval of the project.
Okay, I think that message is going to be clear, right, okay, and I would agree with you. So we did have a motion seconded, we can talk about the actual, we can hold off on the actual approval of the warrant wording itself, but the recommendation, since we have it on the table already, I think we'll go ahead with, in case somebody else has any further comment or discussion. So all those in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 1 of the special town meeting, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. I'll take this opportunity to ask people watching, please find out all the information you can. This is a very important project to the town on so many levels. But, I would ask people that educate yourselves. We'll put as much information out there. The school building committee is having 2 forums, as Mr. Matthews said, and we'll say again when we get to committee reports on Thursday. There's the websites, there's printed materials at locations everywhere. I hope that there is no reason anybody who is intending on coming to town meeting or going to the ballot does not come fully armed with all the information that is out there on what this project is, why we are where we are, and what the benefits and what the ramifications of doing it and not doing it are, all those things. So please, please find the information. And then ask people if you don't have it or you don't have something you need. So with that being said, we have Articles 2 and 3. As these are zoning articles, we generally don't take a position until we hear the presentation.
Right.
I don't know if the board has any desire to take any different stance on this one, but I will open it up to discussion.
In this particular case, basically what they're asking for is a year to do more research on exactly where it would be appropriate, what the restrictions need to be. You cannot say that they are not allowed. You have to identify a place, and so what they're looking for is a year to do that. So I don't have a problem. Basically, what these 2 articles do is put a moratorium on for 1 year to allow the planning board the time that they need to do that. So personally, I don't have a problem making a recommendation to approve at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm struggling with this just because, trying to support business. The Lunenburg voted for this, the state voted for it. The world is changing on many things. I see this as, the dispensary. I will be voting against a moratorium. I think we should be working very quickly to try to get this. I don't think there's going to be anybody coming into town at the moment because they tend to go towards the urban centers. But I would prefer to wait to make recommendation at town meeting.
As my own point of view, I'd want to hear what the presentation is. I understand that this law went into effect January of this year. So that means they're going to ask for an additional moratorium because by de facto there was kind of a moratorium because nobody knew how to cite them anyway to begin with. So I tend to agree with Mr. Ebersol. If things are allowed, I want to find out why we're not allowing them, even temporarily, and what we're looking to gain or what we're concerned about. But I'm also going to give the planning board a lot of latitude and explain that to me, because there may be some things that I'm just not aware of. So I think we should, without objection, unless there's an objection, we'll wait for a town meeting, special town meeting. And I assume that goes for Article 2 and 3?
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, Article 2, if it stays as it is, I don't have any problem with, because all it is a definition. I assume the definition is coming right from the legislation itself. But we'll just wait for both of them.
And Mr. Chairman, Carrie, just one other thing, assuming that the mailing to the public, it's got this annual town meeting and annual town election, if you can add the last dates to register to vote, because I believe that this mailing will go out before those dates. I'm not sure what.
Talking on this page right here?
That's right, residential customer, assuming that it's going to get out before the time to register.
So could we just spend a minute talking about what information you would like to see at your next meeting, and if you intend at that meeting to make a recommendation on the financing of the project? Is that something you wanted to do, to have included in the warrant, or not? And I didn't look at Survey Monkey to give you an update on.
Well, I think we should put that on, I think we should put that on the agenda for next week and make that one of the prime things and get the final results of the survey. I'm not against talking about it tonight, but I don't know that it's necessary either.
And I don't know if it needs to be in the warrant. I guess that's the question, is because I think that's more part of the discussion. And ultimately, it will be up to this board to determine that. Obviously, I think it's going to be part of the discussion at town meeting because it impacts financially the voters. But I don't know if it should be in the warrant. I don't know.
If I think about it, I think you're right. I probably should not, I would not include it. Especially unless somebody's thinking that we want to put that as potentially part of the article, the motion, or the warrant article itself, then there's really no reason to.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be part of the motion.
Right.
You just say
It's
by
not.
borrowing.
Right.
But I would recommend that we take a stance before the Finance Committee hearing on the 19th.
Well, I would agree with
Yes,
that.
I would
And
agree
if we do
with
it
that.
next week, but as far as inclusion in the warrant, I would probably concur with Mrs. Bertram. I don't think it really has any place in the warrant article.
So then any information that's included in the warrant relative to the cost would include both scenarios for 20 and 30 year financing? Or
Oh, so you're not talking about the warrant, you're talking about the packet of information that's going to accompany the warrant? Is that similar to what you put in for the school? Is that?
yeah, whatever
Okay.
report goes in the mailing.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I understood Mr. Ebersol's question. Or do we want to do it before the Finance Committee meeting and inform them, or do we want to hear what they have to say to help inform us on the 20 or 30 years?
Good question.
Have they discussed it?
I have an opinion of how I would vote right now, and frankly, it's not going to change based on the discussion with the Finance Committee, so.
I don't think you're supposed to say that.
I think you're supposed to have an open mind, Bob.
The fact is, I think that we've already had lots
Bob
of.
keeps an open mind.
Nope. We've already had the discussion of the financial impact on both scenarios, the 20 and the 30, and I'd proposed at one point of a 30 for 10 years going down to a 20, and talking with Carrie and other things like that certainly be considered, but it's not going to give the relief that I would want to see, so I'm not going to be advancing that. Somebody else might. So we basically have the two options with the 20 and the 30. I'm supporting the 30 at this point. With the concept of what the average citizen does. I'd love to have a 15, 20-year mortgage on my house, but I can't afford that. I have to go with a 30. I know it's going to cost more. And I know that other people have different opinions, and so that's my concern in looking at what the average taxpayer is going to be doing, hearing what the people have said out there as far as the impact. And it's also my belief that the cost of the school should be spread over the years of the people having use of it. We're not going for the 50 years of the expected life, but I would say over the 30 years. So that's where I'm coming from, and it's no disrespect to the Finance Committee, because it's where I believe that I would be, no matter what additional information, because I know it's going to cost more.
I want to just say I agree wholeheartedly with your comments, and I also support the 30. While granted, ideally I'd love to go with the 20, because in the long run it makes more sense for the town. But honestly, I don't think that the average taxpayer, nor myself, can fund it over the 20 years. So personally, I am going to recommend the 30.
Just to show that, unlike Bob, I do keep an open mind. And part of my thoughts now include, spread the cost over the end users more so than, the front end, to people who won't be using it. That had a big part in it. Also, just simply doing the math. Carrie did some math when we were doing our last forum. Bottom line is, to the average taxpayer, the increased cost, if we go to 30 years rather than 20, is about $2,600. So you're talking less than $100 a year to get the relief of having not so much pain up front and spreading it out over, the people who are actually going to use the facility. So based on that, and I just think it makes more sense, if we can keep it affordable. Yeah, it's going to cost more in the long term overall, but it's a smaller cost to the taxpayers than it may appear. And I live my life with 15-year mortgages and 20-year mortgages, and in this case, like you said, this is a big chunk of money for a lot of people. It's a big impact. So I think if we spread it out a little bit, it makes sense.
What was the difference, does anybody recall, because I don't remember, what's the difference in the annual cost between the two of the average?
It was around $100, round
Yeah,
numbers.
$250, $350 difference. I think it was like, it was
$100 difference a year?
for a year.
A year, I was like,
For a 245,000.
right in front of us.
Actually,
We have the answers.
so it's $100. It's 570
Sorry.
versus 468.
So if you do the math, the 30 years times the 468 versus the 20 years times the 570, it works out to about a $2,640 difference, I believe was the number. And that's over 30 years, so.
Right, well, my feeling about.
And time value of money.
I'm also leaning toward the 30-year, for some of the same reasons. I like the analysis of spreading the cost over the largest amount of population, because certainly there'll be people and families coming and going in 30 years if we make it 30 years. So it'll be borne by more people than the 20 years. The flip side, of course, would be that 20 years would free up more municipal money for other things that have to come along in the 20 years since then. But the reason I'm really leaning toward it is I think it's just like 30-year mortgages and 20-year mortgages. People will say, well, why would I want to advance the payments now? It's more of a psychological advantage than it is not. Why would I want to pay more if I have the option to extending it and paying a little bit less, even with the extra costs? So, I mean, my tendency would be to, in this particular case, I don't usually, for shorter term things, I certainly go for the shorter payback, but on something that's this magnitude, $72 million, of which we're going to pick up approximately 36, I think the 30 years makes the most sense.
Then may I be so bold as to suggest, since 4 of you have indicated an interest in 30 years, that we eliminate one of the variables and of this very complicated project and stop talking about 20?
As the one that hasn't spoken yet, I have no problem with that at all.
There we go.
And besides, since Bob's not going to change his mind anyway.
I've been known to-
Okay, so we'll make that, so it's 30 years. We're gonna do it as a 30-year bond.
And we can, 10 years look at it. If it makes sense to refinance, God knows what the interest rates will be. And I can't imagine it'll be lower than now, but, you know, I think back my first mortgage, I think it was 10.5%. And I think people thought that was a great rate compared to now, so.
So can I take this opportunity to make an announcement that will
Sure.
officially come out tomorrow, I guess, or certainly by Thursday? We were notified actually yesterday afternoon that Standard & Poor's, the other bond rating agency, has upgraded the town's bond rating.
Excellent.
Contrary to what I said that it wasn't going to happen. It has happened, and we right now carry a AA- rating with Standard & Poor's, and it's being upgraded to AA+, which
Wow.
is
Nice.
Wow.
two notches. The reason being is Standard & Poor's has gone through an evaluation of their rating criteria, and they've changed the way that they rate all of their credits. But there's been a lot of positive results for municipalities because they rate both, you know, government credit and business credit and that sort of thing. So this, I don't have the report yet. It's coming to me at 9 o'clock tomorrow. We have the opportunity to review it, and then it will be finalized. It's really very significant. Standard & Poor's is the rating agency that we have been using for probably the last 10 years. Prior to that, we used Moody's. We talked about the Moody's removal of the negative outlook and how significant that was. And the reason we went through that process is we're still paying off some debt that carries Moody's ratings, that is 10+ years old. Back when Moody's was the primary credit rating agency for municipalities in Massachusetts. Across the country, it's always, Standard & Poor's has always been predominant in the municipal market, but in Massachusetts, Moody's was. But about 10 years ago, or maybe 12 at this point, Standard & Poor's came in to increase their presence in Massachusetts, and the way that they have rated municipal credits has always made, or the way that they have rated credits has always made more sense for municipalities in the way that we do business. And a lot of municipalities shifted to Standard & Poor's, but where you have an outstanding rating with Moody's or with Fitch, if you did, you know, you have to maintain that to maintain the integrity of the bonds for the bondholders and that. But you know, we're not jumping to Standard & Poor's because they like us better. It's who we've been using, and we're just very fortunate that we're going to have that significant increase. And I did ask our financial advisor what he thought that potentially could mean, and he said, well, it could mean as much as a savings of 0.1% on an interest rate, which is huge on a project like this. You can't ever prove that because we're not going to go out to market with two different ratings. We're going to go out to one, and you can only make comparisons. But based on current market conditions and you know, different people going out to market, he said as much as 0.1%. So that's pretty significant, and it really was only back in 2008 maybe that our rating increased up to a AA-. So this is very significant.
Excellent. That's excellent. Are we done with the warrant articles?
Yes.
Okay, an IMA with the town of Townsend for the sale of net metering credits. I believe that was in our packet as well.
Yes, and the Townsend Board of Selectmen is taking this up at their meeting this evening.
Okay, so can we
So,
wait?
yeah, I think you can wait. I think there may be some questions or discussion.
So let's wait to see if we have anything back from them.
I do
Mrs.
actually
Burke?
have some questions or comments that I'd like to just bring forward. I did kind of check with Kerry before the meeting, but one of the things that I'm concerned, I actually have two of them. Looking at page 2 of the draft, the purchase and sale of net metering credits, my understanding from when council was here is that the Schedule Z is done twice a year. And it was my understanding, and I could have misinterpreted what he said, was that we can only do it twice a year, so Townsend would be listed on the Schedule Z, and in the event that we had credits, that would be then passed to Townsend. But reading the way this is written, it looks to me that if we do have credits, we would then amend the Schedule Z. And I'm not quite sure why he put it that way, because you can't just amend the Schedule Z. It can only be done twice a year. So I'd like to understand why we don't just list Townsend on the Schedule Z, and then in the event that we do have credits, it would be passed through to Townsend. So I'd like to have that clarified. The other thing that I question is my understanding is we were going to, it was going to be passed through to Townsend of our costs, because we weren't going to have any administrative costs or any additional costs. But reading page 4, it says that Lunenburg is going to provide Townsend a monthly invoice. And so we're going to be responsible for invoicing Townsend, and that wasn't my understanding. I thought that was going to just be done by the utility company, but that's not the way this reads. So if you look at section 5.1A, it says that we're going to be responsible for the invoicing. Additionally, if you look at number C, it talks about in the event that the local utility elects to make payments to Lunenburg in lieu of providing the credits, that we're going to have to pay to Townsend the share of that payment.
Where are you reading from?
It's
that?
number C. It's that same section, 5.1C. And so I thought that we were doing this because we couldn't get a check, but this preserves that right to. So I'd like some clarification from the town manager. Are we eligible to receive a check versus the credit from Lunenburg? I mean, from Unitil. So there's three components of this
That was up to Unitil, right?
So that's still up in the air with Unitil.
It is. And, we did talk about this before the meeting, and I can't answer the questions, and I'm almost wondering now if I have the wrong draft in the packet. I have been a bit preoccupied. Not that that's an excuse, but I'm just wondering now if this is the right draft. But so I will check that out tomorrow and make sure, and if this is the draft, the final, I'll get clarification on how those issues will be resolved.
And there are, I mean, if you read through this, the billing, obviously it's not going to be a huge task, I wouldn't think. However, if we're going to bear administrative costs, and if you look at page 5, there's a whole section on disputes. If section 5.3, if there's a dispute of the payment submitted by Lunenburg, they have to notify Lunenburg. So we are assuming a lot of responsibility here, but yet we're not charging for that. So I have some concerns about that.
And it doesn't make sense, because if Townsend is listed on the Schedule Z, which is how I understood it, then Unitil assigns the credits based on Schedule Z. So there wouldn't be any reason for the town of Lunenburg to be involved in billing, and we don't want to be involved.
We don't want to have that.
That with Rick, that'd be great.
And hopefully Townsend didn't get this draft if this isn't the right draft.
Townsend got a draft directly from council.
Okay, Board of Selectmen appointment to the School Committee's Advisory Committee for Tolerance and Diversity. Given the current events in the town, the school committee has created an advisory task force, or an advisory committee, I should say, for tolerance and diversity, and they have requested, among other locations, that a member of the Board of Selectmen be chosen to serve on that committee. So I would ask if anybody is, before we discuss it further, if anybody is interested in serving on this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I am interested in serving on the committee.
Is there anybody else interested in serving on this committee? Not that we're looking to pit challenges. Okay, so I don't know that we need to, do we need to officially vote this? Let's do it. Let's do it. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we appoint Bob Ebersol to the Advisory Committee for Tolerance and Diversity.
For a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None.
Thank you.
I commend the school committee on putting together the advisory committee and look forward to hearing through Mr. Ebersol the work that they are doing. Minutes.
So there are 2 sets in there. I did receive at least one correction today that has not been made yet, so I think those were on the
Which one?
19th. Yeah, so the 19th needs to be amended.
Okay. Warrants.
Accounts payable.
Accounts payable warrant in the amount of $546,049.33. Payroll in the amount of $627,412.20. And payroll deductions in the amount of $148,043.21. Action file issues. Anybody have any action file issues? Hearing none. Want to do this? Committee reports. Board of Health.
No report since last week.
Building reuse. I think we don't have to ask that. Capital Planning Committee.
Meets tomorrow on schedule.
Finance Committee.
Meets December 12th, as we mentioned.
Library Board of Trustees.
Library Board of Trustees met on the 21st of November. They started with a tour of the building, and we got to see the public places and the private places, so the nooks and crannies. It was interesting to see how the staff works, but also the mechanicals and the various things like that. So they again sing the praises of DPW and the support that they get on adjusting the HVAC and other things like that, so they're very happy with that. The Friends of the Library on a regular basis give money for various projects. They basically paid for cleaning of the windows inside and out, so not everything has to be done by the town. There's a lot of good work on that. They're continuing to work on their updates of their computers. They're looking forward to, well, maybe I'm putting words into it, but the mass broadband connections and all the various things like that. They already are connected statewide with various systems. They do a lot with the money that they get, both from the town and from the Friends and from the fines, and just looking at all the various technologies that they have to deal with. And they have, there's going to be an ongoing program going forward. It's interesting that they were able to talk about how some of their programs are affected by other town events. And so they may schedule something, and if the school committee has a big meeting or some other meeting, then it affects them. So the concept, again, of the need for updating our website for the town calendar that goes for meetings, but also for other non-meeting calendar type things, I think would be good when we cross over between town and school and library. I think that would be helpful.
Excellent, thank you. MPO.
No report.
Planning Board.
Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the last meeting, so I don't have a report.
Okay, PAC.
The PAC met last night, and with a quorum, and part of the meeting was normal business, but also we went over continuation of our workshop, the open meeting law, implications of that, One of the things that I came away from that, and I did make a comment, is that the open meeting law has changed from when a lot of people who've been in government for a long time, what they learned originally. And I think that one of the things that was good about the session is that there was a lot of discussion at the board level, similar to when we had town council here, amongst the members. Well, can we do it this way? No, that's not enough. The agenda item's not specific enough. Or in the minutes, you need to have this. So I'm actually recommending, and I would certainly volunteer on some of this, but a more individualized open meeting training for various boards and commissions or individual members, because you can watch the YouTube on the Attorney General's website for the open meeting law, but there's a lot of sections that don't apply to certain things, and you're going to get bored. And, oh, by the way, I want to ask the question. Well, there's nobody to ask the question. Town council was very helpful. We learned some things as far as like our executive sessions, what we had to do on things like that. So I think that as people ask for help, that whatever we can do individualized, I think would make a big difference. It also allows people to ask the question right away. It becomes less of a not willing to ask a question in front of other people. But I think the PAC meeting was very successful in getting to the point of saying, in fact, they have to schedule a meeting for next Monday to do some things that they couldn't do last night because it wasn't on the agenda in the way that it would normally need to be. Now, in the future, that's not going to be an issue, so that was a learning opportunity. I think there was a lot of discussion about that. The other thing that they're looking to is volunteers, both students and adults, to learn how to do filming, to work with the PAC. Joe, who is the manager, the administrative coordinator, they're going to be talking about regular training sessions. They've scheduled some and people haven't shown up. That's always an issue sometimes, but they're going to try to do it on a regular basis. They're trying to do outreach. And again, I'll make a pitch for people to be on the committee. Some people may not have wanted to be on because some of the controversies in the past, but I think that this committee has some very good things to do, continuing to maintain open government in Lunenburg.
Thank you. School committee.
No report. I missed our last meeting.
School building committee.
We have our, again, public forum Thursday at 3 and at 7 to learn more about the project. Also, there's been a lot of discussion that there was a greenhouse as part of the plan, which, as proposed, it hasn't been spec'd out yet, but it was proposed to be a glass, an architectural structure, a glass and steel, plumbed with a foundation, et cetera, which is totally different than what we currently have at the school. And there was a lot of concern, I guess, in the public, in the Agricultural Commission, about spending that kind of money on a greenhouse versus the plastic and wire hoop, I guess high tunnel or whatever they're called, that most of them use. So I had a conversation with the chair of the Agriculture Commission. They were going to get together and give us some insights into perhaps what would be a lower cost, more practical application as opposed to doing something. Of course, the issue is the glass greenhouse is going to be fairly prominent. Currently we have the plastic hoop one, which is in a courtyard, so no one sees it. So, we'll have to look at it aesthetically, et cetera. But reaching out to them to give us some input and some ideas to try to accommodate both goals. Keep the horticultural program. Again, this was all going to be part of the science program. Science labs is going to be integral to the educational process. So trying to find some middle ground here where we can save some money and hopefully still achieve those goals. And just for out of interest, I was looking, some of our neighbors are going through the same process. And just for comparison, North Middlesex is looking to build a new high school. Their project is going to house 870 students. It's going to be 180 to 190,000 square feet, depending on what they finally do. Their budget for that is $88.6 million. Air Shirley is in the process of doing the renovation of their high school, building it for 495 students. Cost on that is $56 million. So, building a high school is more expensive than building a middle school, so we have a bit of a hybrid, but I think if you compare costs, 72 million for 190,000 square feet 820 students comparatively. I think we've got a pretty good project coming to the voters.
I would agree, and those two numbers that you just cited really, again, underscore the point that, number one, these are certainly in line with what other communities in our own area are doing, and given those comparisons with square footage, and obviously they have their own needs that are different from ours, but we are getting, I think a lot of people worked long and hard to get a $72 million project that incorporates both the middle school and high school with all the features that we're looking to bring it up to modern day school for the price that they did. So I think those are great comparison numbers. Thank you. Sewer Commission.
As a result of the presentation tonight, they had to postpone their meeting till next week.
Okay. Mass Broadband, no report. I think that concludes.
I just mentioned
Do we have any town manager reports?
No, but I'd like to make a statement. The Finance Committee is meeting on Thursday, December 12th at 7 o'clock for the purpose of receiving the 5-year financial forecast. That will be a televised meeting, and we do formal invitation to Board of Selectmen and School Committee, so that will be forthcoming, just so you can put that on your calendar.
What is the date again?
Thursday, December 12th.
Okay.
Wanted to remind you that you have a site visit scheduled for Sunday, December 8th, which is this Sunday at 9 a.m. For the Lane property at 300 Holman Street. And I also have for signature the consultant agreement for our municipal aggregation program that you approved at the last meeting, or meeting before that. There was a problem with the signature block, so I will send that down.
3 copies?
3 copies. Also, either at your December 10th or 17th meeting, you will be presented with your annual license renewals. The 17th is your last meeting of the calendar year. The license renewals are on an annual basis, so the 17th is pretty early in the month. We're in the process of putting everything together, collecting on some past due amounts that are owed. I think depending on what next week looks like, we'll have to see whether, I hate to just put it on the 17th, and then if there are any problems, then you don't have another meeting, but I'm not sure where we'll be next week.
Well, I want, and as previous years have been a rule, and I think this has come up several times, if people are not caught up on their taxes for any of these licenses, I am not in any way voting for, unless somebody has the most extenuating of circumstances, in any way going to approve anything contingent on them bringing in the payment before the end of the year. Either they're paid when we're going to renew them, or they're waiting till the beginning of the year.
Yep.
And please make sure that is made clear to all the establishments.
It is, and last year you didn't make any contingent approvals. I think the year before that you did, and we were able to do that, but it was made very clear last year there were no contingent approvals, and everything was paid before your meeting. It's just, with the 17th, usually you meet a little bit later in the month. But that's just the way it works this year.
Since this is our first year doing that, is it going to be similar to the gravel removal permits in that you get a spreadsheet of that plus the individual information on each licensee, or how do you normally present it to the board?
I think we just provide you with a list, a summary list, and then we have the individual licenses here.
Okay.
But we just report whether it's paid. And paid includes a bona fide payment plan with the Treasurer Collector's Office in accordance with state law. Paid also means that anything that is owed in the current year, fiscal 14, is not delinquent. So we're looking at fiscal 13 is delinquent. Somebody owing something for the first quarter of fiscal 14 is not legally delinquent. Just so you You know that.
And we do them by classification of license.
Okay.
So all the different victualers license and all the different kind of alcohol licenses and recreational amusement licenses, they're all in their own category.
And was there one license that we were going to switch to a yearly that we just
The
did?
the golf
Yeah.
course license.
Yeah.
right?
The base license.
The base license.
Thank you.
Okay, no appointments, reappointments, resignations, no executive session. Our next meeting next Tuesday, December 10th, right here again at 7 o'clock. Do I have any further or more public comment from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to follow up on with Carrie's comment about the S&P upgrade. I want to give credit to Carrie, to the Finance Committee, to the town for doing the things that are financially responsible, establishing the stabilization fund, other reserve funds, having a balanced budget, balancing it at the end of the year, not trying to draw down our reserves inappropriately. It's tough not to take some of that money for a current year expense, but all of those actions go to this. It's not just they do it out of, oh, let's give them, they look at our financials. And the day-to-day operation with Carrie overseeing the financial portion and the budgeting process goes a long way, giving the financial entities comfort to say that Lunenburg is going to do the right thing. It may not be as much money as people would want to spend in some cases, and in other people, some people think we spend too much money. But the fact is, they're looking at what we're spending money on and how we're doing it. So I would say kudos to all involved.
Agreed. Any public comment from the public? Okay, then I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, none. Good night, everyone. See you next week.